Hi everyone, welcome to TirEssence Martial Arts channel and part 2 of our Fact and Fiction, episode 1, The Rise of the Invincible Young Lu Chan. Well, in the last episode we covered his early life and how he eventually was introduced to Beijing to the royal prince and became a personal instructor of the royal prince's son. Now, one of the common myths that I should address, although I have mentioned in the past, is that people claiming that Tai Chi or combat Tai Chi is nothing different to wrestling. Now, I highly disagree with such claim. Okay, for simple logic, the royal prince or any Manchurian royalty or Manchurians in general at the time are all well trained in Manchurian wrestling, and Manchurian wrestling was pretty much the foundation that eventually became what's known today as Chinese wrestling. So they are like the forefathers of Chinese wrestling, and I see no reason for them to learn wrestling from a Han person, right? A Chinese Mandarin person, because they already are the utmost authority on wrestling, and to learn it from an outsider is just completely unreasonable. And of course, furthermore, if Yang style Tai Chi is just wrestling, then the form is kind of pointless. I mean, you can forcefully, put its movement and interpret them as wrestling, but there is also a better interpretation, which is striking. Okay, it's just that almost no one know how to strike anymore who practice Tai Chi, and that's why it all result in explaining all those weird moves as wrestling. But again, that's probably for another time for a more practical oriented video. But I just like to say that the whole myth about Yang Luchan teaching wrestling doesn't make sense in the context that, Manchurian would not learn wrestling from an outsider. Furthermore, later on he was tasked to teach one of the military camps that reside near Beijing. And again, they wouldn't need to learn wrestling from him. Okay, anyway, moving on to the next point. So, there's another thing that before I forget. Obviously, up to this point, we can say that the fact that Yang Luchan became the personal instructor for a royal prince would suggest that he is highly skilled, okay? Because there are a few hundred famous martial artists in Beijing at the time, but only he got the job. Of course, the kind of argument that people sometimes say is that, he had connection, which is true. He had Wu Yuxiang and he has Wu Quanyou and all of that. However, you have to realize that the prince is not on the same social level as Wu Yuxiang's brother or Wu Quanyou, right? Those two are military officials, but the prince is much, much, much higher. So therefore, the prince has no obligation to hire someone they introduce. Okay, they have to face, or they have enough influence to make the introduction and the audience, but the prince will basically judge that candidate by their own merit. The prince will not just hire someone because these two guys say this guy is good. Okay, they're not on the same social level to do that. In fact, these people, whether it's Wu Yuxiang or Wu Quanyou, will try their best to impress the prince, which means anyone they introduce had to be extra good, that had to impress the prince enough that they will have better faith, in Chinese, what we call, right, better respect from the prince or appreciation. Then they are not going to rest their neck, introduce someone who isn't good and pissing off the prince. So the fact that they introduced Yang Luchan would mean that at least they think Yang Luchan is really, really good. And the fact that the prince hired him on the instant would suggest that the prince also thinks he's really, really good. Another argument people like to make is that, these are aristocracy, right? They are like, royalty, they don't know anything. Well, if you're judging aristocracy based on the European, the French royalties before the French Revolution, then there are a bunch of people who are lazy, lack exercise, lack of anything physical, and completely spoiled. However, that's not the case for Manchurians in the Qing dynasty. Right? Those of you who don't know, Manchurians were originally a nomad race, much like the Mongolians, and they invaded Ming Dynasty, China, and they eventually conquered China on horseback and with archery and military might. And after that, they basically tried to maintain that military tradition So all Manchurians in the imperial city, including royalties, they have to learn horse riding, archery. They have to participate in hunting constantly to remind themselves of their martial origin. Now, I'm not saying there never been a single royalty who lacked exercise, but as a whole, the royalties of the Qing dynasty are not as weak as as some of the other royalty from other towns in other places in the world. Of course, towards the end of Qing dynasty, during the Eight Armies invasion, during the Boston Rebellion, the royalties are starting to show weakness. But still, you have to keep in mind that some of the rebellions against the crown was also orchestrated by other prince or uncle of the crown. So they're still quite active in both political means and military maneuver. So they're by no means a bunch of weaklings, okay? And this prince most likely is no different. So although he wasn't an expert of Chinese martial art, he was definitely well trained in the military art of Qing dynasty, and therefore he has some understanding to physical prowess. And I don't mean muscles or something like that, but he can see when a person moves with grace and coordination and can fight or not. Right? This is not something that a prince at the time was not able to tell. And of course, he will most certainly test him against other martial artists, maybe his own guards, to see how good he is. So for me, that argument that impressing aristocracy is nothing to be impressed with, I don't find that to be true. Okay, and after that, it's almost like having the best job, like I said, right, in the entire martial art world is to be able to teach in the imperial family, even with just one prince. And the doors that it opened, for example, there were general who was practicing with him, there were like stewards of important people practicing under him. So everyone who studied with Yang Luchang were influential people in the city, and they're also well off. So Yang Luchang went from almost going bankrupt to pretty well off and be able to afford a property in Beijing, and that's very rare. That was really rarely achieved by outsiders who are just martial art expert, right? Who are not merchant or getting rich from other means. So obviously this then caused a lot of jealousy from other people, other martial artists, and therefore after that, Yang Luchang was constantly challenged by all kinds of martial artists from all kinds of styles and places. Now, one of the kind of arguments that people often, suggest here is that because he worked for the imperial family, therefore no one actually dared to challenge him, and therefore he became undefeated. Now, I think that is completely bogus, okay? Because teaching the imperial family, or aka the prince's son, does not make you part of the imperial system. He was not drafted into the imperial system, which means he is still a civilian. He's not an official, and therefore the law that protect the imperial officials does not protect him. I mean, sure, he could do some backhand maneuver, go behind and talk stuff to the prince or other powerful people, and they can then in turn arrest the martial artists in question or punish them. Yes, he could do that, but you have to realize that if someone does that, he will completely ruin his own reputation within the martial art world. Okay, if you do that, you will lose all your street cred, so to speak. And from what we can gather, Yang Luchang was well respected by most martial art systems at the time. Now, how do we know this? Obviously, like I said, there are no official record, but what you can do is check how every style alive today in Beijing who trace back to those days talk about Yang Luchang. Of course, I do know a few individuals who talk bad things about Yang. And I believe they do so from their own personal agenda, right? They're trying to bash Tai Chi to promote their own style. But majority of the people that I've encountered in Beijing, whenever you talk about Yang Luchang, they will say that the master or the grandmaster and stuff all mentioned about Yang Wudi being highly impressive in his martial ability and was not defeated. Okay, you don't get this kind of reputation unless people actually believe it, right? You can't get it by trying to use political power to punish people who try to threaten you. It's just like if you or me today claim that, you know what, my name is going to be Invincible 1. You know what, no one's going to buy it. No one's going to call you by that. And no one's going to remember that after 100 years, right? It's just not possible. So the fact that people today still remember that means a majority of the people, martial artists at the time, agreed to this title. And what this title means is, at the time, okay, not only was he teaching in the imperial family, he also became invincible or undefeated as his title. And this kind of title would bring a lot of trouble, right? If you go back to those days, you call yourself invincible and let the word spread, people will come to challenge you. It's unlike today, right, where people like to talk and keyboard warrior more than like to lift their hand. Back in those days, martial artists made a living from fighting, not from talking, right? A lot of them they get a living from armed escort or personal bodyguard or guarding a mansion or guarding certain treasure. They make a living from actually doing that, which is a risky job. So none of them are scared of fighting. And when someone claims to be undefeated, it will attract more people wanting to fight him. Okay, that's how it's gonna be. That's how it most likely happened back in those days. So if Yang tried to keep that title for so long, it would definitely suggest that he was an exceptional fighter. I can't say he's number one, but he's definitely at the top at the time in the imperial city. And if you're at the top of the imperial city at the time, it's safe to assume that he is the top of the entire China at the time, because the imperial city has the highest quality of martial artists congregating. Alright, so this is another point that we can basically use to measure or to basically guess whether or not Yang Yuchang was an exceptional fighter. Now, one of Xu Xiaodong's argument is that, Yang Yuchang is not a good fighter because you can't show me a video of him fighting. I don't know if he was making this as a joke, but when he said it, he wouldn't sound like joking. He said, video or it didn't happen. Obviously, this is like a very silly argument, okay? But I'm gonna address it anyway, just in case there is confusion. Okay, so Yang Yuchang, let me just quickly check here. So Yang Yuchang was born in 1799 and he died in 1872. Now, if I remember correctly, video camera was not invented until the early 1900s, so it was impossible to have any video record of Yang Yuchang at all. And of course, when the video camera was invented in the West, it took even longer for it to be brought to China. And when it did, it was kept within the rich and powerful. The first video camera brought to China wasn't used to film martial artists, so the chance of him having video is impossible. All right, and not having video does not mean something didn't happen. We don't have video of anything before the 1900s. But does that mean nothing happened before that? All the wars, all the conflicts, like famous fences in European history. You can't say that, right? So although video is the best proof that we have today, you cannot use the same measurement to judge things before video camera was invented. Okay, so all we can do is to judge it based on how many accounts support certain claim or contradict certain claim, right? Just like how HEMA, for example, research historical fences, right? They look at maybe the fence's own autobiography, yes, autobiography, and they look at how, if whether or not other famous fencers at the time also mention about this fencer, or maybe, whether the royalties or other, authorities mention about this fencer. We can find more than one or two sources of people all mentioning this fencer and saying that he's good, then you can assume he's pretty good. And this is the case for martial art as well. Although, Yang Yuchang or any other martial art master, they're not big on writing an autobiography. They're not big on writing. It's like, if you think about it, we live in that world, you are focusing on living it. You're focusing on beating the next guy, on practicing. They're not writers. So the last thing in their mind is to write down what happened. But if you know someone who lost to him, then you're gonna tell your student, and that's gonna pass on. And when so many different sources all pass down similar info, we can pretty much say next to 100% certainty, right? There's not 100% certainty like I've explained, but we can almost be 100% certain that Yang Yuchang was definitely a very, very highly skilled fighter. So I think that is enough reason for us to understand that he was definitely not fake, and you can't really make a claim to undefeated and just make people accept it without going out to prove it. Another thing that you should take into consideration is the famous encounter between Yang Luchan and Dong Haichuan. Now, Dong Haichuan is the founder of Ba Gua. He was at the time working as a steward in one of the government officials. And again, he was also one of the top high-level martial artists at the time in Beijing. It's uncertain how his paths crossed with Yang Luchan, but we can pretty much say for certain that they definitely did meet, right? That meeting definitely happened. We just don't know how it happened or why it happened. Now, there are a lot of myths regarding that meeting. Some claim they fought for 3 days and 3 nights. Some claim like other crazy stuff. Personally, I think those are incorrect and impossible. No one can fight for 3 days and 3 nights, and there's no reason to fight for 3 days and 3 nights. If you can't win the fight in the first few seconds, based on the Chinese, Northern martial art efficacy on Dueling, you lost. Okay, I talk about this in my Patreon only video on Dueling and efficacy, but I guess for those of you who don't subscribe me on Patreon, I'll just quickly mention it, right? So in Dueling, in the northern part, especially in Beijing, they eventually had an efficacy where each party makes 3 attempts to be on the offensive. Each attempt consists of 1 application, was consisted of 3 to 4 moves. And so after that 1 application, you stop and you re-engage, and again you break up and re-engage. So if after 3 attempts from one side, 3 attempts on the other side, no one was clearly the winner, then the duel is considered a draw. And of course, if I'm on the defensive and he attacks first, I can basically neutralize his attack and retaliate. So you are not forbidden, you are not forbidden from retaliation. You just can't make the first move. And furthermore, if you keep running back whenever someone makes an attempt, it's considered a loss. So you can't just keep running back every time the guy makes an attempt, and after 3 attempts, you can get it to a draw. It doesn't work like that. You have to actually be actively doing something against him during his attempt to hit you or to finish his application. Yeah, so if some of you are interested, we can maybe do a more in-depth video on that at a later stage for non-Patreon subscribers. But anyway, so based on this kind of efficacy, it is impossible for Yang Luchan and Dong Haichuan to fight for 3 days and 3 nights, or even for 1 day. Okay, the fight will have to finish pretty quickly. So there's very little info other than the fact that they draw. Okay, draw is pretty much a certain. It's pretty much, I can say with certainty that it was a draw. No one won, no one lost, and that's why the 2 styles, Yang style Tai Chi and Ba Gua, were put on the same level of pedestal. They were classified the same level of martial arts at the time. And as to why they draw, my guess would be, again, there's no evidence on this, but my personal guess is that they actually touch hands, and they felt each other's structure, power, and everything else, and realized they are similar leveled, which means they can never determine a clear winner according to the dueling efficacy. Okay, surely, if you were to keep fighting, eventually someone would win, someone would lose. But what's factored into that is basically, your stamina, endurance, reflex, mental fortitude under stress, a lot of other aspects. It's no longer just your martial abilities, not your training on the martial art aspect. It's like the other aspect. It's also training, but in Chinese martial art, we see it's a different aspect to your martial ability, or the martial art training, the ability you acquire from martial art training. So although they could determine a winner by doing that, most of the high-end masters feel that is pointless, because up to that point, someone will end up getting hurt badly. And unless you have a blood feud against someone, there's no reason to hurt someone badly over a duel. So when 2 people touch hands and realize that they have similar structural force, internal power, or whatever the currency is that they're dealing with, they will stop the duel and admit that 承让, and then they will know that it is a draw. So that's most likely what happened between Yang Luchan and Dong Haichuan. There's another myth, right, where Dong Haichuan and Yang Luchan was walking down the street. So a bird flew past. Dong Haichuan leaped up, caught the bird in his hand, gave it to Yang Luchan. Yang Luchan held it in his palm. The bird couldn't fly up. I can't really comment on that. I think it probably didn't happen. But I can't say for certain it didn't happen because it could happen, but very, very unlikely. However, what you take away from that story is basically the ability to keep a bird from flying away. Of course, I'm not saying that Yang Louchan could do that to a bird, but again, like I said, I can't prove that he couldn't do it to a bird. But what I can say is dissipation of force is a thing within the Tai Chi practice. Basically, there's a theory behind why the bird couldn't fly. Is that every time the bird tried to lift up with his feet or claw, Yang Louchan sucks in that power and dissipates it so that the bird feels like he's stepping in cotton, right? Or water. Like every time he tries to step down, something drags him down, and therefore he can't get the rebound force to fly up. Now, I don't know if a bird really needs that to fly up, or if they just flip their wings, they can already take off. I don't know about that. I don't do research on birds. So I'm not going to comment on that. What I can say is when I do push hand with my own Tai Chi master, he can produce a similar result on me as a person. There are times where I try to apply force to him, the force sinks into him, it disappears, and I feel like I'm losing balance and I'm leaning into him. And I can't stand properly. And it's very hard for me to pull my balance back without him exploiting that split second of vulnerability. So that similar feeling does happen, right? It can be achieved to a human in the Tai Chi practice, but I can't say it can be applied to a bird as well. So there could be a chance that Yang Louchan was famous for doing that to a person, and then that person would then comment on, well, I'm like a bird that couldn't fly or something like that, and that led to that legend. I don't know. So take that legend with a grain of salt. That's what I can say. Now the significance on the duel between Yang Louchan and Dong Haichuan having a draw is to mean that Yang Louchan's combat ability is basically on the same level as Dong Haichuan. And Dong Haichuan, again, is also very, very highly praised for his combat ability, right? He also started from a nobody and became one of the most prominent martial arts masters of the time. And so not only can you see how people appreciate Yang Louchan's ability from the styles that talk good things about Yang Louchan himself, you can also kind of measure his ability by seeing how many other styles talk good things about Dong Haichuan and praising his ability of fighting. If Yang Louchan is fake, that would mean Dong Haichuan had to be fake as well. And that is a very huge claim, with a mountain full of evidence against it. And funny enough, Xu Xiaodong himself does not criticize Ba Gua. Okay, and the reason for that is because his own Sanda teacher, Mei Huizhi, was also part of the Ba Gua system. That's why he stayed clear of Ba Gua and doesn't criticize it. But like I said, because he lacks the knowledge or the insight into the traditional martial art history, he doesn't actually know the duel between Dong Haichuan and Yang Louchan. So ironically, when he trash talks Tai Chi, he's indirectly trash talking Ba Gua as well, which is something that he actually doesn't want to do. So it's just a bit of funny irony there for you guys to smile at. It's nothing major, but like I said, the fight between Dong Haichuan further proves that Yang Louchan was one of the high-end fighters at the time in China. And lastly, we're going to look at how some of these martial artists wanted to learn from the Yang family. Okay, now when we talk about this, one of the common argument is that, well, the Yang family has political gains, they have political power, so of course these other martial artists want to flock to them, suck up to them, so they can also brush off their connection. While this may be true on paper, if you look at actually what happened, none of those guys actually got any political gain from them. So if the Yang family really sucked at fighting or martial arts, these people would maybe try to suck up to them for a few years, didn't get the gain, and then they would just bug off and do something else better with their life. They wouldn't stay with the family, for as long as they did, with no hoping of getting any political advantage. Okay, for example, one of the famous martial artists that say very good things about Yang family is called Liu Dekuan, right? He's often known as Da Qiang Liu, large big spear Liu. Right? He is a martial artist, I believe, from the Hebei province, which is outside of Beijing, and he made his name in Hebei as well as in Beijing. He did many styles during his lifetime, including including Bagua, and he eventually developed a linear Bagua form, right, that can be taught to military easier than the circular one. He also sort of simplified it. And he actually spent time learning from the Yang family. And later in his life, he claimed to be, a Yang family disciple, and he also taught some Tai Chi. Now, he was an established martial artist before he went to the Yang family, so he has no reason to study from Yang family second generation. He studied under Yang Jianhou, I believe. Has no reason to study there if the stuff isn't good, because clearly he didn't get a job in an imperial regiment. He didn't get any political gainings or social gaining from that. He simply learned the martial art and he went his own way and did his own things. Another famous case that we can look at is Zhang Ce, right? The founder of Wuxing Tongbei, my great grandmaster in Wuxing Tongbei. Now, when he was very young, his elder Tongbei brother called Wang Zhanchun, who at the time was one of the highest hands of old Qi family Tongbei, right? He was very highly recognized among Tongbei people at the time, as well as other martial artists. He was very famous for his fighting ability. He was a lot older than Zhang Ce. I think he was in his late 30s when Zhang Ce was in his teen. So although they are Tongbei brother, he treated him more like a son, so to speak, or baby brother. And he told Zhang Ce that, Yang family are very, very good, so you should learn from them. And what he did was Wang Zhanchun was a close friend to Yang Jianhou, and some say he was a friend to Yang Banhou as well. So he introduced Zhang Ce to Yang Jianhou and asked that they would teach his little baby brother. And Zhang Ce spent 10 years studying in Yang family because of that. Now again, Wang Zhanchun would not have done that if he did not think that Yang family stuff is very, very good. And given the fact that Wang Zhanchun was a very famous and top level old Qi family Tongbei master at the time, would suggest that what he thinks is good, again, must be really, really good. And the last case we're going to look at is Sun Lutang. Okay, Sun Lutang was perhaps one of the highest recognized martial artists at the Republic era. And, he was already quite recognized when he was doing Xing Yi. He was, being taught by Guo Yunshen, with his grandmaster, directly, and then sent to Chen Tinghua to learn Bagua. And Chen Tinghua was very impressed with his skill as well. And after that, he pretty much went everywhere, and people all praised him. Now, of course, Sun Lutang is a figure of controversy as well, which we might address in a future episode. But today we're just going to look at the fact that even when he is very accomplished in Xing Yi and Bagua, he still insisted on learning Tai Chi. And he actually approached the third generation Yang family, which is either Yang Shaohou or Yang Chengfu, or maybe both of them. I know for certain he approached Yang Chengfu. I'm not sure if he approached Yang Shaohou, because Yang Shaohou is a very reclusive man, so he doesn't really mingle with people. So I can't comment on that. But Sun Lutang definitely approached Yang Chengfu, and they were kind of like brother by oath, actually. However, Yang Chengfu refused to teach him, saying that his Xing Yi and Bagua is very good already, and Yang Taiji had nothing more to offer him. Now, some of you might think, that's evidence that, Yang Taiji isn't really that good. But what actually most likely happened is that Yang Chengfu felt that he was a threat to the Yang family, but he's already highly accomplished and probably a better fighter. I would say he's most definitely a better fighter than Yang Chengfu, because Yang Chengfu is not really known for fighting, so he's definitely a better fighter. So Yang Chengfu is afraid to expose his own family secret to Sun Lutang. Sun Lutang become even better than the Yang family, and he wouldn't like that. So that's why he refused to teach him. However, after that, Sun Lutang still wanted to learn Tai Chi up until his 50s, okay? When he came across Hao Weizhen, the third generation of Wu style or Hao style Tai Chi. He helped him out in the Peko, and in return he asked to be his student. Now, it is commonly noted that Sun Lutang is far better fighter than Hao Weizhen. He easily defeated him in a simple duel. However, he still kneeled down and bowed to Hao Weizhen to learn Tai Chi. What this means is Sun Lutang really wanted to learn Tai Chi. And if Tai Chi sucks and could never fight and Yang Luchan is fake, then why was Sun Lutang ever wanting to learn from Hao Weizhen, someone who's inferior to him in fighting, but might have the secret to Tai Chi? Of course, I can provide even more examples of famous and recognized martial art fighters who learn from the Yang family, but it will all result in the same conclusion, which is that majority of the high-level recognized martial artists at the time, they thought very highly of Yang family and their ability to fight. This only started to change during the third generation with Yang Chengfu, but that again will be a topic for another time. So based on everything that we've covered today, I would say with almost certainty that Yang Luchan was definitely a very high-skilled fighter, maybe not the best, but definitely not far from the best. And his title of the Invincible Yang or the Undefeated Yang is well deserved. So even though Tai Chi today, in general as a whole, 99.9% sucks and can't fight, you can't really fault its founder, right? Everything in this world tend to deteriorate. So it's like, if we take a multi-millionaire, his great-grandson might not be rich anymore, right? After 4 or 5 generations, all the money might have been gone. But it doesn't mean that his forefather wasn't filthy rich. So the fact that Tai Chi can't fight today, it does not mean that it never could fight in the first place. Alright, so I hope this makes sense, and I hope this whole bunch of info is interesting to you guys. Let me know how you think. If you've got any constructive comment, be sure to leave it in the comment below, and I'll definitely get back to you. And if you find my channel useful, please subscribe, and if you can, support me on Patreon, which will be able to allow me to create more consistent content in the near future. And lastly, I'd like to just again remind everyone to stay safe, keep your social distance, wear your protections, and stay away from people. Be patient and endure through this crisis, and then everything will hopefully go back to normal. Again, thanks for watching TriEssence Martial Arts channel, and I'll see you next time. Keep well.